Time to go out on the Western Pizza guest hotline here and say hi to Dustin Forbes. Let's bring him back in on the show. He is the play-by-play voice for the Lethbridge Hurricanes. And the Western Hockey League will look incredibly different this year because last year when the NCAA said it's okay that players from the Western Hockey League can play in the NCAA, and I was like, ooh, what will this do? And what about NIL money? People are like, no, it'll be a slow trickle. We don't think it'll be and then the thing happened. Now the exodus has started with none other than Gavin McKenna, who's expected to be the first pick overall in the NHL entry draft this upcoming season. Dustin joins us. Dustin, how are you? Because Medicine Hat is not far from Lethbridge, and that Tigers team, their roster decimated between Gavin McKenna, Ryder Ritchie, and Caden Lindstrom, no longer part of the program. Wow.
Yeah, it's been quite the summer, unlike any other, quite frankly, around the Western Hockey League, with players committing to the NCAA and leaving earlier than their eligibility would expect you to see them leave. But it's the new landscape that we are dealt with, and so we'll see how it all unfolds. Obviously, at first blush, you're concerned because the Western League's lost a lot of good players, and you mentioned the to-be first overall pick, probably the to-be second overall pick too, and Keaton Verhoff of the Victoria Royals going to the University of North Dakota. So there are some certainly significant names leaving the league, but as we see every year when those players leave, be it at 18 or 19 or 20 to go on and play pro, there's always players that come up through the systems across the league that make a name for themselves and become household names in short order. So we might have to see that sooner than maybe expected.
But if you're Willie Desjardins, now I get it. You're a Lethbridge Hurricanes guy, and your checks say Lethbridge Hurricanes on it. But if you're Willie Desjardins, you have to kind of feel for the Medicine Hat Tigers. It's not that you just lost one player, and maybe you lose three top-tier talents. You were just in the Memorial Cup final last year, and you lost. And you think, well, we've got a stacked roster. We're going to try and run this thing back. The simple question, can you recover from something like this? I said, there's opportunities for others, but those are three special elite talents.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. I'm paid by the Hurricanes and I'm the voice of the Hurricanes, but obviously you pay attention to the league and you have a lot of respect for the people around the league. And Willie's one of those people, and the Tigers organization for that matter too. It's tough to see. I think from a Medicine Hat perspective, it definitely isn't favorable for sure. I mean, you're talking about three really good players, three players that are, elite players at our level, two that are, one's a top four pick, one will be probably a number one pick, and another that's a second round pick. So some significant hit in terms of their, run it back mentality. But every team has been affected by it for the most part. I mean, we just saw over the weekend Ollie Josephson from the Red Deer Rebels, their captain and leading scorer from last year, who's a Seattle Kraken draft pick commit to go play, I think, at UND as well, University of North Dakota. And you talk about being the team in the East that's been hit the hardest. Victoria Royals in the West, maybe the hardest hit, with Cole Reshny, who was a first-round pick of the Calgary Flames, committing to go NCAA. Mentioned Keaton Verhoff before, who is only going into his 17-year-old season and set records as a 16-year-old defenseman in our league last year. So it is concerning, I would say, from like a broadcaster's perspective. I'm sure from a fan's perspective, and I would imagine that the people who make a lot more money and are a lot smarter than me, having a seat at the governor's table for the Western Hockey League, are wondering where the league goes from here. But like I said before, you're going to see younger talent in the league. You think about Maddox Schultz, who can play up to, I think, 34 games this season in Regina. Liam Pugh there as well, and some other good players around the league that were taken in the first round. And it's going to be a recalibration, right? I mean, I know Craig Button had kind of mentioned it on a podcast late last week about how many of these players come back to the Western Hockey League.
I saw that.
Because they can go.
I saw that.
And maybe they don't play a lot. Maybe they struggle to produce. Maybe the game aspect doesn't favor them with playing only 34, 36 games and having to attend school all week leading up to the game. So there's a lot of unknowns, right? What we do know is that there's been a lot of players that have left the league. Where we go from here, it's going to take some time to recalibrate. Where does the league go? Does it become a younger league? We'll
I
see.
think so.
And the other thing too is, and I know this from a Lethbridge perspective, and I would have to go through and look at all of the other teams, but Lethbridge has been impacted because Jackson Unger is committed to go to Colorado College. Miguel Marcus is committed to go to Maine University. So those are two pieces that would be eligible to play in our league this coming season. But with the NCAA being open, Lethbridge has been able to sign their first round pick in this past year's U.S. priority draft and last year's U.S. priority draft in Cash Whitmore this year. And one of the all-name teams, Enzo Di Cantanio, from last year, say that 10 times fast. So will we see an influx of U.S.-born players that would usually go play USHL or try and go for the U.S. national development team come here because they can still go to NCAA when their junior career or major junior career runs out or before? So I think it's going to take a couple of years for us to see how it actually all unfolds. But I would say it's definitely concerning when you see the amount of really good players leave our league. And I don't know if the numbers are accurate, but I was kind of doing a count around 80 commitments and roughly 30 to 35 of those guys that could play in the league this year, either at a 20 or 19-year-old age, a couple 18s and one 17 with Verhoff. So there's a lot of unknowns. So it's hard to put together a full analysis of what happens moving forward, but I would say it's concerning.
Dustin Forbes, the voice of the Lethbridge Hurricanes, is joining us. We're talking about the Western Hockey League and the NCAA. When this first came up, and I remember on the show that day with Barney, we're talking about, oh, Gavin McKenna's going to go. No, he's not. Well, money. Well, they can't get money. And I said, the NCAA for decades has made a business out of getting guys that shouldn't be getting money for playing. And now that NIL, and if that number is true, it's $700,000 for him to go to Penn State and all that. Can you imagine what Maddox Schultz's agents and parents, the numbers that are probably coming across their emails and their cell phones at this point? And he's not even he hasn't played a game in the Western Hockey League yet, but could you imagine that? And I said, don't worry, they'll find a way to get the parents the money. The average salary in the American Hockey League is, this, between 60 and 70,000 US, maybe. If you can get some life-changing money up front, because there are no guarantees even if you get drafted. Are a lot of kids looking at this from, just your opinion, or maybe a hockey standpoint, but maybe a little financial stability standpoint to pay back mom and dad and help the family? Because it's sooner or later, the parents have made a huge commitment to get them to this point. And if there's a way to kind of say, hey, listen, we can get it here, because nothing's guaranteed beyond getting a chance to play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's a factor to that. I do think that there's probably it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Put yourself in a pair of shoes at 18, and if you were offered a couple $100,000 or in some cases significantly more in Gavin McKenna's reported amount too, that's hard to say no to. Like I'm 34 years old. If I was offered that type of money, it would be really hard for me to say no. So, and you're right, there are no guarantees. The one thing I do know that there is a guarantee is that you can't sign an NHL contract while you're playing NCAA, and you can in the Western Hockey League. So you look at some of the players that have left. I would say you have the top end talent like the Reshnies and the McKennas and the Verhoffs. But you've also got some middle round picks. I mentioned Marcus. He's a 3rd round pick of the Nashville Predators. Tomas Mercic from the Prince Albert Raiders, a 4th round pick of the St. Louis Blues. So those types of guys that maybe they sign, maybe they don't sign an NHL contract. And so you're looking at, okay, here's an amount of money, whatever that is, guaranteed to go and play versus hoping that I get an NHL contract. But the juxtaposition to that is now you've got in those two instances, 19-year-olds who are going to play against men who have less games to impact the game, and it's going to be tough to find ice time. And if you do get the ice time, are you going to be able to produce? Those are all the questions that if you're a player, if you're a player's family, and if you're a player agent, you have to put on the pro versus con list before making your decision, I would think. Now, money speaks and money talks. You know, AC/DC sang it best in the 80s, money talks. And if you come to the table with enough money, it's an easy decision. But I do think that eventually, you know, let's see where the league is at come Christmas time. And then let's see
Yeah.
where the league is at come April when the playoffs actually get going, and see if that turns into a reality, how many of those players come back to the Western Hockey League. I think of a guy like Adam Tambolini years ago with the Calgary Hitmen, who went and played NCAA and then decommitted and came back and played in Calgary with the Hitmen. And I think he helped them win a championship, or at least went to a WHL final, and was a really good player at this level. So that's one instance where a guy went NCAA and came back. Will we see that happen again? I wouldn't be surprised. And I know, like I mentioned before, Craig Button, who knows a lot more people in hockey than I do and is probably more piped in than I am, suggested that last week. So I wouldn't be surprised if that does come to fruition. But how many of those 35 guys, if you will, want to round up, that could play in our league this year will come back? It's a wait and see game.
I don't know. I've seen some of those sorority videos on TikTok over the past 7 days or whatever. That looks, I can catch your eye. All right, we have 30 seconds left. Dustin Forbes. There is a new bench boss in Lethbridge. His name is Matt Anholt. Why do you like Matt Anholt as the new head coach of the Lethbridge Hurricanes?
Well, first and foremost, I've worked with Matt now for 7-8 years, and it goes back even further when he was still playing, when he played NCAA at Alaska Fairbanks. And I think he's perfect now for the job. And I know in Lethbridge there's the conversation about, well, he's the general manager's son because he's Peter Anholt's kid and Pete's the GM. But from a guy that I see is the first in the rink and the last to leave the rink, and is one of the hardest working guys I've worked with, it's contagious. And I think for him, now is the time. And if it wasn't going to be here, it was going to be somewhere else. And I know that for certain. So give him the opportunity and run with it. He's younger, or he's older than Pete was when Pete was named the head coach in Prince Albert. So he's got some work to do to catch up to Dad. And I'll say this before I go. Matt took over on an interim basis a couple of years ago when Brent Kissio was at the World Juniors. And I think he went like 4-2 in the 6 games when Brent was away. And Matt and Pete Anholt are the winningest father-son tandem in WHL history for coaching wins, surpassing Brent and Kelly Kissio. So, but a lot of those are Pete's wins. So Matt's got to start to pull up his, yeah.
All right, it's Dustin Forbes, voice of the Lethbridge Hurricanes. We always appreciate your time. Let's do this again once the season gets rolling, and we'll see where this conversation has taken us, see where some of the maybe the knowledge plays out.